What's up, riders? Coach Craig Householder from Holistic Integrated Training and our Mobility for Mountain Biking program. I'm here today with part 3 of our series on the dreaded forearm pump. So if you caught video 1 and 2 of the series, we learned how to perform controlled articular rotations for the wrist and use that in the second video to analyze if we have enough wrist extension and if we have enough wrist flexion. So today's video, what we're going to answer is what to do if you do not have enough passive range of motion in either wrist extension or wrist flexion. So the way we solve them, we're going to pretty much do the exact same setup. So I'll come into quadruped position, and this is a great way to do it. I can also do it up against the wall, where I would just kind of run my arm up the wall. But let's say I'm working wrist extension this direction. I'm just going to come in and I'm just going to start to slide my arm back until I get to the end of my passive stretch. And again, I should feel the stretch on this tissue in the back, the stuff that is elongating. I should not feel a pinch on this side, on the closing angle of the joint. If you do, go ahead and drop me something in the comments and we can talk through it a little bit. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my passive stretch, and then from here, I'm going to start my timer for a 2-minute hold. So during this 2 minutes, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to make sure that I keep my stretch as intense as I possibly can, but I'm also going to make sure that I keep my breath calm. So I'll do a nice 4-second inhale in, 8-second exhale out. And I'm just going to go through that process for the next couple minutes of continuously making sure that I maximize my stretch, and I do that by just increasing this angle and just bringing my body weight forward. I want to keep the arm locked out nice and stiff. It's important to note here that once I start my stretch, you will not stop your stretch throughout this entire process. So I'm just setting up a nice 2-minute hold. Breathing in, breathing out, and keeping the stretch right to the edge as intense as I can. So let's say that I've held for that 2 minutes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some driving, some isometric loading to lock in my results. So what I'll first start to do is I'm going to start to drive my fingers down into the turf. And we're going to do a very slow ramp up. So think like your fingers are sitting on the gas pedal, and you're going to push the gas pedal down just 10%. And then we'll go up to 20%. I'll take that gas pedal up to 30%, pushing it down a little bit harder now. I'll go to 40%, to 50%. At 60%, I'll let every muscle in my body contract so that I can irradiate and start to press that wrist up a little bit higher to 70%, to 80%, to 90%. And eventually to my greatest, safest effort, which is holding the end range but trying to drive my fingers down through the floor as hard as I can. And I'm going to keep that up for approximately 10 to 15 seconds. When I can't drive any more into the floor, I'm actually going to go the other direction, and I'm going to try to pull myself deeper into the stretch. Now on this side, we call this the rail side or the regressive side, there's no ramping. We're going to go straight to the hardest thing we can, and what I'm going to do is now I'm going to try to lift my fingers off the mat as I pull forward into even more wrist extension. And I'll do the same thing about 10 to 15 seconds, driving as hard as I can. So you can't see it right now, but what I'm trying to do is lift my fingers off the mat, and as I do, I'm allowing my wrist to flex in like I'm pulling myself, using the tissue on this side to pull me into stretch. Now, after I've done one round, I'm going to ask myself a question. Can I do another round with equal or greater intensity than that round? If the answer is yes, let the nervous system calm down. A few breaths, again, not breaking our stretch. And then we can go through another round of pushing the gas pedal down, driving down into the turf, and trying to lift the fingers off and pulling ourselves into stretch. So that's for wrist extension. If you wanted to work wrist flexion this direction, it's a very similar setup. I'm just going to turn my hand over And again, I'm going to push my arm back in this direction, and I'm going to intensify the stretch. Again, I should be feeling the stretch stuff on this side. If I feel it on this closing side, that's a problem with the joint, and you should maybe just send me a comment or a DM and we can talk our way through it. After my 2-minute passive hold, where I just stretch and try to breathe through, I'll start to drive my fingers down into the mat, wrist extension. So start driving 10%, just like we did on the other side, 20%, 30%, the whole way up to my greatest, safest effort. When I get to my greatest effort, I'll drive for somewhere around 10 or 15 seconds. When I'm done with that, my job is going to be to try to lift my fingers off and flex my wrist more as I pull back. So the thinking is that you're actually pulling yourself deeper into that stretch. So that's a couple techniques that we can use if we don't have enough passive range of motion in the wrist. So Coach Craig Householder from Holistic Integrated Training with our Mobility for Mountain Biking program, helping you to get a little bit more passive flexion and extension in the wrist. Get out there and ride.